In our previous video, we had looked at the unrecognized state of Zimbabwe Rhodesia. Today we'll be looking at the British colony of Southern Rhodesia, which had previously been under the administration of Cecil Rhodes, British South Africa Company, which would eventually become Rhodesia and temporarily revert back to the British colony of Southern Rhodesia following the transition to Zimbabwe. Now, you may be asking yourself, how does Southern Rhodesia become a British colony? What was life like in Southern Rhodesia? And so many more questions related to that. Well, today we'll be answering all of that. So let's jump into today's video, and don't forget to like and subscribe. So as usual, let's start with a brief background to the events prior to the establishment of Southern Rhodesia. Before it had been established, it had been referred to as South Zambezia, and during the scramble for Africa, which started in the 1880s, which in short can be defined as the invasion, annexation, division, and colonization of most of Africa by 7 Western European powers during a short period roughly between 1881 and 1914. During this time, Cecil Rhodes, a British-born South African businessman and politician, had envisioned annexing a piece of territory that would connect the Cape of Good Hope and Cairo, essentially connecting the southern and northern tips of Africa, and a railway to link the two, also known as the Cape to Cairo Red Line, and the area would be referred to as Rhodesia from 1895. However, this vision was hindered by various factors such as the Boer republics, the Kingdom of Ndebele land, whose people had migrated from the south. They owned most of the land and subjugated various Shona groups. Ndebele land was ruled by Ndebele king Lobengula, son of Umzilakazi, as well as many other factors hindering his vision. However, due to having mining rights from King Lobengula to dig for gold in October 1888 and another for land in 1891, as King Lobengula only allowed this to occur so as to secure money and weaponry for the Ndebele, in addition to a pledge that any people who came to dig would be considered as living in his kingdom. However, this was not the case at all, and he was essentially hoodwinked into ceding land and mineral rights to Rhodes, as he did not fully understand what he was signing, as he was illiterate in English, which was normal at the time, and he would use missionaries and other European guests who would frequent his crowd to draw up and interpret documents for him. Sadly, he only realized after signing the documents that the country had essentially been sold, and that the oral promises made by Rhodes were not enforceable. This also ensuring the exclusion of German, Portuguese, and Boer territorial threats to the British possession in southern Africa, and that Rhodes' plan to connect the Cape to Cairo by telegraph and railway would be accomplished essentially without costing the British taxpayer a penny, thus creating a common phrase that Lobengula sold Zimbabwe for a bag of sugar. Due to this, the administration of what would become Rhodesia was chartered by Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom and Empress of India to Rhodes British South Africa Company in 1889. Although the company was set up to run the territory as a commercial venture with the power to form banks, own and manage land, trade with local chiefs, and raise its own mounted infantry force, which would become to be known as the British South Africa Police, BSAP, who protected settlers exploring the area as well as playing a central role in both the First and Second Ndebele Wars, which were both bloodbaths, honestly speaking. The British High Commission for South Africa was responsible for its overall supervision from 1898, although the company continued its activities, particularly in commercial agriculture and mining. In exchange for all of this, Rhodes British South Africa Company had to respect the laws enacted by existing African rulers and uphold free trade within its borders. However, the full extent to which this actually happened can be seen to have not happened on the way envisioned. However, military force had also been used, and it was another bloodbath in itself, honestly speaking. Rhodes was now in possession of vast amounts of territory divided by the Zambezi River, which would be renamed Rhodesia to honor the man who had been a key player in British expansion into Southern Africa, which would run from 1890 to 1924, with the land south of the Zambezi River being called Southern Rhodesia, which attracted many settlers, which is now Zimbabwe, and the area north respectively being called Northwestern and Northeastern Rhodesia, and would later be combined to form Northern Rhodesia in 1911, now called Zambia. And through treaties, concessions such as the Root Concession and Moffat Treaty, these colonies, like many others, oppressed the black majority, with white settlers owning much of the land and wealth. In 1917, the Responsible Government Association (RGA) was formed. This party sought self-government for Southern Rhodesia within the empire, just as Britain had previously granted responsible government to its colonies such as Australia, before said colonies would eventually be received full dominion. The RGA mainly opposed incorporation into the Union of South Africa. As legislative power in Southern Rhodesia grew, it gradually transferred from complete company rule to effective self-government by growing the number of white settlers, and the remainder of land owned by the British Crown in relation to already private land owned was sold to the white settlers. In 1922, a referendum in Southern Rhodesia chose responsible government within the British Empire over incorporation into the Union of South Africa, with the company charter being revoked and Southern Rhodesia becoming a self-governing British colony. Southern Rhodesia was officially annexed by the British Empire on the 12th of September 1923 and granted full self-government on the 1st of October of the same year. The new South Rhodesian government immediately purchased the land from the British Treasury for a reported amount of £2 million, with the British South Africa Company retaining mineral rights in the country until 1933, when they were bought by the colonial government also for another reported amount of £2 million. Under the Southern Rhodesian First Constitution, Sir Charles Conglan, a lawyer and politician, became the first premier of Southern Rhodesia. During World War II, Southern Rhodesia's military forces participated on the side of the United Kingdom, and they had incurred reportedly the highest loss ratio of any colony of the British Empire. However, Rhodesian pilots reportedly earned the highest number of military decorations of any group within the empire, so much so that the royal family paid Rhodesia a visit at the end of the war to thank the Rhodesian people for their efforts in World War II, with a postal stamp commemorating the visit of 1947. In terms of the economy of Southern Rhodesia, it can be said to have been doing relatively well, as it was an economy based on production but not limited to resources such as tobacco and coal, which were doing great during that era. To add to this, the recession of the 1930s, which had seen a boom in Southern Rhodesia's economy, resulted in a reported number of 200,000 white settlers between the years 1945 and 1970, bringing the white population to a reported amount of 307,000, with most of them being from the British working class. It can also be documented that the population had also greatly grown due to increased birth rates and immigrants from countries such as Mozambique, Tanzania, the Belgian Congo, and Kenya. This boost in numbers and immigration can also be attributed to a phenomenon referred to as the development of early settler identity in Southern Rhodesia from 1890 to 1914. This taken from an extract and research by Giulio Bonello, as British interest in the Southern African region had greatly increased during that time frame. As in relation to colonies in the region, Southern Rhodesia's white settlers had begun to reportedly distinguish themselves in relation to settlers nearby due to factors such as economic and political power in relation to oppressed native groups, in which they viewed very poorly, which is evident in the text on the screen. Strong local interest and a common identity among the settlers, as they were primarily British settlers who did not incorporate certain societal norms from back home and used this to achieve their political and economic goals. This can be looked in relation to the Afrikaner-dominated Union of South Africa, as most Southern Rhodesians were English-speaking people of British descent. So essentially, they used this essential shared culture, language, and societal norms as a weapon to reduce internal struggles among themselves to achieve shared goals, which essentially formed the identity, which is my opinion, by the way, in interpretation, and it can't really be attributed to anything else. Like, that's just my honest opinion on the matter. By the 1940s, a university had been constructed in Salisbury, with funding from the British and Southern Rhodesian governments, as well as private funding reportedly. Something unique about this was reportedly the condition for British funding is that admission be based on academic achievement and character, with no racial discrimination, which was not necessarily common for areas at that time that had white minority rule, such as the Union of South Africa. And in my opinion, this is what would greatly go on to shape the manner in which the native population was included in the overall education system within Rhodesia. University College of Rhodesia, UCR, received its first intake of students in 1952, with the current name being University of Zimbabwe. With calls for independence in the 1950s in many of its African possessions, as well as the economic interdependence of Southern and Northern Rhodesia and Nyasaland, as well as the argument that individually the three colonies were vulnerable, the United Kingdom created the Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland, or Central African Federation, or simply put, CAF, on the 1st of August 1953. The overall intention reported was to try to find a middle ground between the differing aspirations of the black native nationalists, the colonial administration, and the white settler population. The CAF reportedly sought to emulate the experience of Canada, Australia, and South Africa, where groups of colonies had been combined into one viable independent nation, such as the amalgamation of the Cape Colony, Colony of Natal, Transvaal Colony, and Orange River Colony to form the Union of South Africa, now South Africa. However, the federation quickly started to unravel due to the low proportion of British and overall white citizens in relation to the significantly larger black populations. In contrast, by incorporating the various African groups within the federation as potential citizens, the federation created an unbalanced and unfair situation of having a white elite population owning most of the land and capital, while using cheap native African workforces with significantly less economic and political power as compared to before the creation of the federation. Due to aspects such as this, the federation was dissolved on the 1st of January 1964. However, it was expected that only Nyasaland would be let go, and that both North and South Rhodesia would be united. Although Northern Rhodesia had a white population of over 100,000, of which most were relatively new to the region, who were primarily in the extraction business and did not have a shared identity such as the Southern Rhodesians, as well as having little landed interest. They had also been more open to allowing black nationalism in comparison to Southern Rhodesians. Thus, Britain granted independence to Northern Rhodesia on the 24th of October 1964. However, when the new nationalist changed its name to Zambia, Southern Rhodesia remained a British colony, resisting attempts to bring in majority rule. The colony attempted to change its name to Rhodesia, although this was not recognized by the United Kingdom and the rest of the world. The majority of the Federation's military and financial assets went to Southern Rhodesia, since the British government did not reportedly wish to see them fall into the hands of the nationalist leaders. And since Southern Rhodesia had reportedly incurred majority of the expenses of running the Federation, however, Northern Rhodesia was reportedly the wealthiest of the three member states due to its vast copper mines and had contributed more to the overall of the building of infrastructure than the other two members did. Southern Rhodesia, recognizing an inevitable dissolution of the Federation, was quick to use federal funds in building its infrastructure ahead of the others. A key factor of this was the building of the Kariba Dam and its hydroelectric facility, which was situated on the southern Rhodesian side of the Zambezi Gorge. The situation would later cause problems for the Zambian government, as when it became a frontline state in support of insurgents into Rhodesia, its major source of electric power was controlled by the Rhodesian state. With the Protectorate of Northern Rhodesia no longer in existence, in 1964 Southern Rhodesia reverted to the name Rhodesia, and in 1965 Rhodesia unilaterally declared itself independent, as the British government had requested that they provide way for majority rule, but they rather opted to provide rule on wealth instead of race, but it was still essentially on race, under a white-dominated government led by Ian Smith, which was internationally not recognized. And after a long civil war ensued, the Salisbury government, realizing the situation was unavoidable, as well as facing strong international pressure, concluded the internal settlement with the black nationalist leaders in March of 1978 to form Zimbabwe Rhodesia, which you can check out on the video above. It's fire. However, the state of Zimbabwe would not last long, as it was to be branded an unlawful state, and Rhodesia would temporarily revert back to the British colony of Southern Rhodesia, so democratic elections could be held to transition to Zimbabwe. A final remark can be made that the history of Southern Rhodesia was long, and that the area known as Zimbabwe has had various transitions in order to become the state it has become now, with these transitions occurring even before the colonial period. If you had enjoyed today's video, please don't forget to subscribe and comment in the comment section, and I'll respond back to you. Thanks for watching, and have yourself a great day.